Good evening, I'm Vikram Oza, and this is the big question on NDTV Profit. Now, over the last few years, the global AI conversation has largely been dominated by the two big themes. One is speed, the other is supremacy. Who builds the fastest models, who controls the chips, who writes the rules. But now, at the India AI Impact Summit in New Delhi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has attempted to shift that frame and recalibrate the discussion. He has unveiled what he calls the Manav vision, which is this human-centric approach to artificial intelligence. So this is a framework that puts moral and ethical systems, accountable governance and national sovereignty, also accessible and inclusive technology, and valid, legitimate systems. These are put at the core of the future of AI. Hence, the pitch is that AI must increase human potential, not replace it. And it's an important one because almost missing from the larger global voices that we've heard, which is why it is critical. He makes a few sharp points over here, that AI must shift from being machine-centric to human-centric. That means being sensitive and responsive, more humane. That humans cannot be reduced to data points or raw material. That's another important point. Also, he says AI must be a medium for inclusion and empowerment, especially in the global south, because we should not lag. And he says, as we enter an era where humans and intelligent systems co-create and co-evolve, the direction we choose today is going to determine whether AI becomes a disruption or it becomes a solution. Now, this couldn't have come at a moment too soon. The backdrop is of real anxieties, aren't they? And we've been talking about them on the show, whether it comes to jobs, the bias in automated decision-making, on deepfakes, those kind of issues, on data privacy, on copyright disputes, questions of accountability when AI systems cause harm. All of that are the anxieties. Now, globally, the debate is no longer about what AI can do. It is about what AI should do and who gets to decide what it should do. Listen in to what the Prime Minister has said earlier by way of this Manav vision.
आज न्यू दिल्ली एआई इम्पैक्ट समिट में मैं एआई के लिए MANAV मानव विजन प्रस्तुत करता हूं। मानव का अर्थ होता है ह्यूमन, और मानव विजन कहता है मोरल एंड एथिकल सिस्टम्स, यानी एआई एथिकल गाइडेंस पर आधारित हो। अकाउंटेबल गवर्नेंस, यानी ट्रांसपेरेंट रूल्स, रोबस्ट ओवरसाइट, एंड नेशनल सॉवरेनिटी, यानी जिसका डेटा उसका अधिकार। एक्सेसिबल एंड इंक्लूसिव, यानी एआई मोनोपोली नहीं, मल्टीप्लायर बने। वैलिड एंड लेजिटिमेट, यानी एआई लॉफुल और वेरीफाइबल हो।
So taking into account whatever the Prime Minister is saying and laying it out as a vision, it's a stark difference from what we've heard around the debates about AI, because it has been about how it can change the world. Now, the question is not about AI changing the world. It already is. Now it is about how this change is going to unfold and what role India is going to play in the kind of change that we are likely to see because of AI. How human-centric can it be? Which is why that question, can India lead the world in balancing what AI can do and how humanity is going to be placed vis-a-vis the developments that AI brings about. Let's discuss this with our panel. We've got a great panel, like always, joining us on the show. Let me introduce you to them. Well, on the show tonight, we have Kelly Forbes joining us, council member at the AI Council at Click. Mihir Shukla is also with us, co-founder, CEO and chairman at Automation Anywhere. Anirudh Suri is with us, tech investor and author of the book, The Great Tech Game. Dr. Sanjay Gupta is Vice Chancellor of World University of Design. and Geeta Manjunath, the CEO and founder of Niramay Healthy Analytics. Great to have you all with us, and thanks for making the time for the big question. Let's begin with a quick round of questions first. We need one or two lines from you in response to set the tone and get your stand up front. And let me begin by asking Kelly. Kelly, the Prime Minister is urging to move from opaqueness to transparency. Do you think this can be mandated? A quick take.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here with all of you today. I think there's a few key things coming out of seeing the summit, and India hosted the summit this year and showing leadership. And I think that transition and what the Prime Minister's statements take us is towards how do we think about trust as a foundation for the AI developments that we must see. Ultimately, for a government like India, the biggest question is how do we use AI to improve society and improve the country and shape various goals by adopting AI inclusively.
Mihir Shukla, in the next 12 months, what are the chances that AI in India can actually create more jobs than it actually displaces? Your response in a line again.
I think it depends on the leaders. I think, do leaders treat this with bhai or is it the bhavishya? I think Modi ji said it very well. And I think India, he challenged all of us to treat it as a bhavishya. I think leaders who will treat it as a bhavishya will generate more jobs.
So not fear, but treat it like our future and own it, right?
That's
Anirudh
correct.
Suri,
That's correct.
The Prime Minister is calling for clear authenticity labels. You think a legal duty to label AI-generated content, which could be watermarking, which could be some kind of authenticity tags, can that happen at the platform level?
No, thanks. I think that it's hard to mandate at the global level, right? But I think that the summit marks an important point for India to say, yes, that it matters to a sixth of humanity. It matters to one of the largest consumer markets in the world. And I think if we bring the global south together to make this a key point, I think then it can happen. I think it'll be very important for all the big tech firms, all the top AI firms that are here, Indian and global, to say that, yes, this is actually something that matters to consumers. And I think more than the Prime Minister as well, I think with his clarion call, it's important that consumers start to ask for it. I think ultimately these tech firms, any AI firm today has to meet the needs of the consumer. And if the consumers, I think as a group demand this, then I think it's very likely to happen.
Like you said, a sixth of the population of the world, and if that is the largest consumption market right now, then perhaps we do get a larger say in how we want the platforms to treat us and to be able to be transparent, not opaque. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the Prime Minister is flagging child safety and family-guided AI. Do you think students under 16 should have that restricted classroom access to generative AI unless that usage is supervised by a teacher?
These questions have come up every time the technology takes a shift.
It does.
And so it is, and what we have seen in the past and what history has taught us is that the more you understand and absorb a new technology, the more easy it becomes to apply for the right causes. So yes, generative AI has its own problems, and there would need to be some supervision, which in any case for any education system and any new technology, the parents and the schools have continued to maintain. So I don't think we are looking at anything new.
Right. So you're putting AI at par with any other technological evolution that we've seen in the past. It's not going to be transformative in the way many others are seeing it, especially when it comes to the pace of change and its adoption. Geeta Manjunath, your take. AI as a multiplier, not a monopoly. Making AI as democratic and inclusive as the Prime Minister is pointing out. You think that's realistic without the subsidized compute, the unhindered data access, which is especially important for the global south?
No, definitely it is possible. And for a country like India, this is a must, right? If we want to use AI effectively, it has to be scalable and it has to be, able to do this at in a cost effective manner. So it's really about the numbers that get benefited. It is possible to provide this at a cost effective manner using the same cloud. Instead of crunching and doing 100 scans of breast screening, for example, it can do 1 lakh screenings at the same compute. It is possible.
Fair enough. Kelly Forbes, let me now begin and open up this discussion because the Prime Minister is saying that humans must not be reduced to data points and AI must be democratized. And in your opinion, is that the simplest way now to stop any kind of exploitative data capture? Is it going to be limiting what data can be taken for? Is it going to be that clear consent one needs? Is it going to be independent audits? What will actually work on the ground as we speak?
Great question. So I think it's very important for India, and it's been good to see this leadership, because as we think about democracies, we really think about how they cannot outsource AI governance to private platforms. And so it really takes a strong role from governments in thinking about what strong frameworks and governance must be in place as we go on this journey of developing and adopting AI. And the benefit here for a government like India is you can watch and observe what the lessons are from other governments that are perhaps ahead of the curve and represent and lead the global south, which we must also think about that in the sense that the global south is very much looking for an alternative to the US and China tech models. And I think what we can see here is that we can create something that can meet the local needs, but also equally think about how do we frame this accordingly so that we're setting the governments strong enough that we avoid potential risks and implications, as we are also seeing that globally speaking, right? So I think the benefits in thinking about transparency, trust, and how do we balance that, that is going to be an ongoing work, but that absolutely can be achievable if we're setting the right foundations and making sure that these are in place as we go about investing more in this area.
So indeed, the leaders, whether it's US or China, they're going to create their own models. And Mihir Shukla, when you're talking about models getting created, it's about who's taking the lead, because then once that lead is taken, then you set the tone, as it were, just taking away from what Kelly is saying as well. If India is able to do that, and the Prime Minister is talking about jiska data, uska adhikar, your data, your right. If India tightens data flow rules, how will the companies train the advanced AI models? How much do we have to compromise on data sovereignty to build world-class capability in the first place? Because we do have to rely on some of those countries that have taken a lead on AI.
Vikram, my and many of the other leaders' view is that India shouldn't follow Western companies in race for best model possible. That's not where India's big benefit lies. It's more about applied AI. How do you take AI and apply it in every aspect of the economy? And in history, all the inventions that have happened, people who have taken those innovations and applied it in various parts of the economy have actually benefited most. And India has an amazing opportunity to do that. And instead of following any other trend, I think we should chart our own path forward.
So are we in a position to chart our own course? And that's an important question that we need to ask. Where are we positioned right now? And as far as Anirudh Suri is concerned, you tell us. The Prime Minister is saying that AI should have this open sky, but with reins in our hands. How much of that is possible? Where do you draw the line on openness? Should everything be open, or do the high-risk AI systems need the tighter controls, even if it slows down innovation, because pace is also important?
Yeah, no, I think that's a core question. But before I get to that, let me also add something to what Mr. Shukla said.
Sure.
See, I think the applied AI versus AI innovation debate, I think is a very important one for India to figure out. I think we've heard both perspectives shared. I think the applied AI perspective seems to be winning currently. But I think it's very important for me to share this, that I think the AI innovation piece is an extremely important one for India to not ignore, because unlike in history, where someone who invented a railway engine did not actually then prevent anyone else from producing it.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the world of AI and technology today, the way IP systems now work compared to 200 years ago, you are not able to actually do exactly what you might have been able to do 200 years ago, to take a technology, invent it somewhere else, and just start using it without having to pay them royalties. Here, we must realize that we are building a lot of dependence, economic dependence also, not to mention geopolitical, on the ones who innovate and make. And therefore, I think for India, it's very important to do both. Right? Now to your question, whether we can let this run free or do we need reins? Right? I'll invoke Lord Krishna here and Bhagavad Gita. See, in a way, the mind, as you know, Lord Krishna ji said, it wants to race ahead. It wants to go everywhere. But ultimately, as he also very correctly pointed out, we've got to rein it in also. Otherwise, the mind also runs amok. So I think similarly with AI, and given AI is actually trying to replicate our brain, I think that analogy makes a lot of sense for us to say, yes, the reins are actually important. You've got to win the race, you've got to win the war, you've got to do what needs to be done to win the game. But I think as humanity, we must have the reins. If we don't have the reins, I think AI can run amok. I think the impact on our health,
So how
the
much
impact
of
on
the
our value
reins
can
can
go
we,
down.
how much of the reins can we actually hold when it comes to the education level in schools and colleges where AI will have to be used? How would you build a simple age-wise ladder for students? Let me ask Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the younger kids discovering AI, how to let them do it safely. The older students perhaps creating with AI, the senior students perhaps learning about the ethics and the bias issues. But which class gets what, and what is the kind of safety kind of guardrails that you need to put that you would apply at each stage of the education system that we have?
See, in higher education, as we, even from right from 2019, when the AI first started building, we adopted a stance where we would aggressively adopt it. Because technology, as history has taught us, that when they start, change starts coming in. And if you do not adopt it, you get left behind. So the change has to be adopted and then used to make up further changes. So we think here that anything which is coming in, the change which is coming in, we must aggressively absorb and then use it to apply to newer technologies, newer challenges, which would then eventually come. But that stands true for higher education. For schooling systems, what AI is bringing in is inclusivity at a level which is unprecedented. It takes education right down to the last person available, and there is benefit in that. How it needs to be controlled, yes, some control and some ethics and some parental supervision would need to remain.
Yes.
But this is a change which you cannot ignore.
You cannot ignore the change, so we need to adapt and we'll need to create the systems. I don't know where we are in creating those systems, but things are moving so rapidly that easily things can go amok, like we just heard. So, Geeta Manjunath, when you talk about health AI, because that's the space that you're coming from in healthcare, do you believe India should stop hospitals from using the black box diagnostic tools unless they can explain their decisions and are tested on Indian patients? Because there is this massive rush to be able to apply AI. What is the minimum evidence that one would insist on? Because especially when you're talking about guardrails, insisting on getting the evidence right becomes the cornerstone for something as important as healthcare.
Absolutely. Actually, when you talk about use of AI in healthcare, we can think about use of AI to sort of use the available resources well, for example, within the hospital, as you explained, or matching the patient to doctor, etc. The non-clinical use. But when it actually comes to the clinical usage, where I come from, where we actually developed this breast cancer screening tool, it's absolutely critical to have elaborate clinical validation. And thankfully, healthcare is a domain where these kinds of clinical validation protocols have already been established with or without AI from a drug discovery standpoint. Now, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of traction and usage of what's called as new medical device category called software as a medical device, where AI is playing the role of a device that was initially being tested with clinical protocols called Helsinki Protocol, etc. So it's absolutely critical to go through the clinical validation. As a founder or a developer of a new medical device, it has to be part of the product design itself that, you do a retrospective analysis with existing data, we do a prospective analysis with new data coming in, new patients coming in, you giving the result and that being compared with standard of care, etc. And these being reviewed and published. So the clinical efficacy is a cornerstone, an important part of any commercially released medical device. And just like US FDA had a lot of stringent rules, now thankfully even CDSCO, Indian regulatory body, has already matured to provide these classes of AI software devices, right? Class A, B, C, D, and C and Ds, high risk, etc. And many of us, though it's just a few, maybe less than 10 of us, are able to go through this rigor and then show that it is clinically validated regulatory. So I think the regulatory systems definitely should be taken seriously, be it in finance domain or healthcare domain. And it's a must. It's not an option.
How do you create the checks and balances within any kind of ecosystem? Healthcare is what you're talking about, Kelly. But when you're trying to apply this globally across many sectors, when an AI tool harms a user, there is the question of accountability. Who should be responsible? The company that built the AI, the company that deployed it, or the one that supplied the data? Do you think that there can be common ground over here where globally everyone agrees where the accountability or where the buck stops? What is the simplest rule that you think India can start adopting, and perhaps that can be a measure that other countries can?
Yeah, that's the question of our lifetime, right? Because we have seen the increasing use cases that really demand for us to really identify where is the liability placed, right? And we have seen how that was introduced to us with the rise of traditional AI and even more with agentic AI and generative AI in the last few years, right? So use cases are only growing, and we have now, I think, an increase as well in court decisions and how judgments across the world are trying to deal with those issues, right? And we have, I guess, a global umbrella that is trying to make sense of these things at an international level, because we know, well, AI across borders, and even though a government can have really strong governance in place, the reality is that actions now of companies that have presence globally can really affect citizens in another country, right? But we also seeing, I think, a strong increase in response from local governments in thinking about how they go about adapting the existing laws. And we see a lot of, I guess, existing examples of that from South Korea. India is doing a lot more work in that area as well.
Yes.
We have a lot of existing laws that would apply to AI, so we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel a lot of the times.
So this is work in progress from what I'm hearing. Anirudh, we've been speaking a lot about deepfakes. The Prime Minister wants clear labels on AI-generated content. But you see real enforcement happen. Is that even closely possible now from where we are right now, practically at the top of 2026? You think there are penalties that could apply if content is not labeled? Do you think we can move that piece? Should platforms be forced to remove it? But have you been able to make, steps that really are significant to that effect?
It's very difficult. I'll be very honest, Vikram. I think it's going to be a very difficult uphill task to mandate it and make it happen and to have penalties, because the amount of content that's out there, the amount of tools that are being used to generate that content, the number of platforms and websites that platform is going to go on to, it's going to be a massive exercise of finding needles in a haystack sometimes. So it's going to be an uphill task. That said, I think one must remember that the tech companies that are helping enable this content, generate this content, those are massive companies with massive teams of engineers, massive resources at their disposal. So I do think that it's a very important responsibility to pin on them that they must do the best possible effort on it. They, of course, will be incentivized to not do it. But I think it's, again, as I said earlier, it's going to be the job of governments and the consumers to try and mandate it to the extent possible.
Yes.
But that said, it's going to be an uphill task.
It's an uphill task. Is it an uphill task when it comes to jobs as well? Because when we're trying to create AI, which is that much more humane, we don't want to be in a situation where every day on this very show, we're talking about the kind of job losses that have happened because of increased automation, because of AI. Mihir Shukla, do you think India can create some kind of system where there is this skilling commitment? And should Indian companies be signing up to it? How do you think that is going to work, where this anxiety about losing jobs because AI is going to take them, we are going to be able to get past it?
Vikram, that is already happening. So just last month, many of the tech companies, that includes many of the Indian SIs, we all came together and made a commitment to retrain 120 million people on AI and automation. So I think there is a lot of effort already underway. I think the key topic, as you rightly said, it is about upskilling and reskilling.
Yes.
And that is where lies the answer.
So how much of that is going to happen in as quick a time now is going to be an important piece. So even as we are kind of looking at this entire piece coming together where AI is going to be more humane, Geeta Manjunath, should India make it compulsory for the high-risk AI in sectors like health, finance or government services to make them undergo continuous monitoring after deployment? Is that going to be a system that we can bring in? Regular reporting of errors, of risks, of updates. What's your take? Do you think that's possible soon?
That is possible. Again, the good part is healthcare has been continuously regulated earlier as well as a medical device. Now what we make is software as a medical device. For example, there are standards called ISO 13485 and others, which actually make auditors come in every year and check the different sort of, like sampling, like a financial audit. It is happening today, right? That will continue, and it definitely needs to continue, yes.
Well, we will hope that it continues, and it continues at a faster keel, because timing is of the essence. India's AI moment is not going to be defined by who has the biggest model, but by who sets the clearest guardrails. The Manav vision is out. It only matters, of course, if it becomes muscle memory, where we're talking about transparent systems, real consent on data, the hard labels on the synthetics, and child-safe defaults as well, which would be baked into classrooms and code. So inclusion is not going to be charity. It is going to be a strategy, because if AI only serves the few, it's going to fail the many, and ultimately it's going to fail the market as well. Right now, the world is racing on speed. India must win, and it must win on trust. That is how we are going to balance intelligence with intent and lead on that count. My big thank you to our guests, Kelly Forbes, Mihir Shukla, Anirudh Suri, Sanjay Gupta, Geeta Manjunath. Thank you indeed for joining us on The Big Question. And that's where we're wrapping it up. Our discussions on AI will continue here on The Big Question. We'll be back with much more. But for the moment, from me, Vikram Oza, and the entire team, good evening.